So this is Adrian Hernandez from Duke, and want to welcome everyone to today's NIH Collaboratory Grand Rounds. So we have another great presentation and discussion lined up here with Harlan Krumholz from Yale, who's addressing an issue that's quite interesting regarding preprints and the what, why, and how. I think this really extends along the themes and discussions and debates around open science and how to generate and disseminate knowledge at a faster pace. So let's go ahead and turn it over to Harlan. Harlan?
Thank you, Adrian, and very happy to be part of this collaboratory talk again and to bring new ideas to the group. So let's just jump in here. So as Adrian said, the topic today is on preprints, what, why, and how. Just want to begin for a second here with my disclosures, none of which I believe are directly related, but I want to be comprehensive in the disclosure. So just for the group, what are preprints? I think those of us in clinical research haven't really been exposed to a large extent to the notion of preprints. It's spread a lot faster and more comprehensively in the basic and physical sciences than it has in our area. But simply put, it's about a scientist developing a product. In this piece, in this graphic, it's a manuscript, but we think of it just as a product which could be sent to a journal and undergo the traditional peer review and then be disseminated out to the world. But there's another track, which is in the course of its deliberation, making it available through posting it on a preprint server and enabling it to be available, searchable, and usable during the period where it's being evaluated. And I'm going to get into other uses of this, but this would be the traditional way of thinking about preprints. Now, one of the issues around preprints is that this is preliminary information. It's information that's being shared while people are commenting on it, while peer review is actually taking place after it's being posted. It's about disseminating new knowledge in a way rapidly so that people within the community can have a chance to see it, understand it, react to it, and have it influence what they're doing. What you're going to hear throughout this talk is this theme of it's really scientists sharing information with other scientists. I believe the preprint server is largely not about trying to influence public opinion or public actions or, in our world, clinical practice, but it's about more rapidly disseminating information so that others who are in the field can immediately sort of take it up and think about it. And I will say in our own work, especially our work in machine learning, our work in artificial intelligence, we're passing around preprints all the time in order to try to understand what's at the cutting edge of the field. And honestly, we're doing our own peer review and commenting on things and trying to foster a conversation with the scientific community as we move forward rapidly. If we waited for publication, we'd be a year or more out of date with what people are doing who are leading the field. And by the way, this is also true within economics. Those of you who are doing any work in economics, most of the time when you're looking at articles, they're preprints. They're things on NVER server, for example. The economic journals can take a couple of years to get things through the publication. And so this is how many other fields work. So let's be honest here, not everyone's a fan of this. The notion that we can have something going out that's pre-peer review, I mean, that just seems so different than the way we've been normally thinking within clinical research. And this is an editorial that was just posted September 26th by Howard Bauchner, someone who I have a lot of respect for and is the editor-in-chief at JAMA, but who is taking a little different view on this. And he comes out and has written this piece that says the rush to publication, of which, you know, preprints, I think, he's targeting preprints in this as a means by which, what's the rush here? And in fact, he's going on to say an editorial and scientific mistake. And, you know, to go further, let's just look at what he had to say about this. He said, progress in human health is measured in years, not days, weeks, or months. Major breakthroughs in clinical medicine are rare. Very few research findings are likely to be implemented immediately. No drug or device regardless of how effective, is likely to improve health outcomes more than many common and important clinical practices, such as measuring blood pressure and treating hypertension with well-known drugs. It usually takes years for interventions that improve patient outcomes to become part of routine practice, and few novel interventions are likely to be more important than those already known to be effective. Improving the health of the world's population has little to do with the speed of publication, but rather with effective interventions. It's a very interesting argument. I mean, he's essentially arguing that most of what you see in JAMA is of really little consequence, will take years to be implemented, and it pales in comparison to the importance of things that we already know. That's a very interesting argument by an editor. He goes on to say that for most articles, public consumption research findings prior to peer review will have little influence on health, but for some articles, the effect could be devastating for some patients if results made public prior to peer review are wrong or incorrectly interpreted. And finally, he goes on to say, sacrificing adequate and thoughtful peer review and editorial assessment is a mistake for research in medicine. Timely assessment and dissemination of medical research findings is certainly important, but for most articles, rushing to publication in days or weeks will not improve health outcomes. So really appreciate Howard's, I think, honestly, his thoughtful reflections on why he's concerned about this, and then he comes out in a pretty strong way against it. I think that there's a sort of a little bit of a mistake here in terms of the way in which he's conceptualizing it, because there's a real dual nature to medical journals. And the dual nature is that medical journals, unlike highly technical journals in many other fields in particular, have a dual audience. I mean, one audience is for a non-expert group of people who are depending on the journals to thoroughly vet the information prior to disseminating it. They want to know what they can trust. Now, we all know even through the peer review process, it's not perfect, and there often will become post-peer review publication debates and controversies that will take a while to play out. So it's not that just because it's through peer review, it's necessarily the truth, but it's been vetted. And that responsibility of being able to send things out to people who honestly are not in a position to do their own peer review, they're not experts in the field, is one role of the peer review publication. But the other, what the peer review publication has also served as a means for scientists to talk with other scientists, because if there are important articles that my colleagues are doing in the field, but for the most part, it's not being exposed until it's through peer review, it means that we are, as colleagues and people within the same field, are not having an easy way to be able to exchange information about what we've got, to be able to archive it in a way where the provenance of the ideas are established, that is, where did it come from, who established what when, and be able to cite it and debate it prior to it going through what can often be an extended peer review. And he says within days or weeks, but we all know that peer review can actually take quite longer than that. I have a paper at one journal that's a revision. We sent in the revision in January, and we're still waiting to hear the decision on the revision. And they keep saying, well, they've had some trouble finding reviewers, and they'll do. We've had another major journal that has been in a month, 6 or 8 months before the first decision. I mean, these things can often take a long time, and the contention here is that by using the same dissemination network, peer review, for both purposes, it means that the people who are capable of doing their own peer review, scientists in the field, people who are working in the field, are being told that, well, you can't really see this until it goes through the whole process, and it really ends up slowing the entire process down. So peer review matters. I don't think that these are at cross purposes with each other. It's not the idea that a preprint server supersedes the need for peer review. Peer review plays a very important role, and particularly for among people for whom they're not well equipped to be doing their own critical assessment of a particular research product. Peer review plays a very critical role. So this is about a complementary role, and that's really what we're talking about. So let me just try to go through this in the argument and just saying to try to keep an open mind, because people can see the same facts differently. And for a moment, I want people to think about what is possible within this realm. So what problem are we trying to solve? And I think it's, how do we easily and rapidly archive and share information with other scientists? to accelerate research, enhance collaboration, reduce waste, and increase transparency. At the end of the day, our goal in producing new knowledge is fighting disease. And, you know, people who are depending on us to make breakthroughs and to make progress can't wait. That, you know, progress can't occur fast enough. It needs to occur wisely. It is true, as Howard says, that things don't always change practice, the work we do. But in aggregate over time, the idea is, yeah, we are trying to change the world. When this was posed in physics, you know, they were asking this question: are we moving fast enough in physics? And what's impairing some of that? And when scientists talking about other scientists were saying that, well, we sometimes are presenting information at meetings within our own institutions. We're presenting, you know, preliminary data or work that we're doing that is still undergoing review, but we're largely waiting to learn about what everyone else is doing after the peer review process. And this guy, Paul Ginsberg at Cornell, asked, is there a better way? Could we, in the course of peer review, be posting things so that others could they could represent rapid communications that then people can build on and do their own peer review and understand and learn what's going on in the world? As I said, in our work in AI and machine learning, we're finding that you cannot be in this field at the cutting edge unless you're able to take advantage of learning from what people are posting on the servers, because it's a very generous community. The world's moving very quickly, and you need that to be able to keep up. And that, at this point, more than 100,000 papers each year are posted on arXiv, and then it's a matter of filtering. How do you filter what's relevant to you? Preprint servers, I contend, are complementary to and not a replacement for or competitive with peer review journals, but they are amplifying our ecosystem. And I just want to go back to this idea. Science for scientists. It's about how does our scientific community share. And by the way, you can't really argue that we're not doing this. I mean, the meetings, which have now sort of transitioned to maybe more finished products being presented than preliminary data, were always meant to be places where this kind of exchange could take place. I mean, it's not that we've said you can't share science with scientists. And by the way, lots of people are, the public is being able to see what goes on at meetings too. But this is about saying, yeah, we need places where scientists can exchange information with scientists. And one of the things about the preprint server is that these documents get a DOI, a digital object identifier, which is a unique alphanumeric string assigned by a registration agency to identify content and provide a persistent link to its location on the internet, meaning that there's an enduring legacy of the thing you've posted, so you know that you'll be able to find it. It's searchable, and you can cite it, and it won't go away. A lot of times, things that could serve as preprints, information that's presented at meetings, for example, is posted temporarily on some site, but isn't an enduring archive of the product, and so you can't find it. So the whole idea here is that there is some place where we can find things. And I'll say, you know, pre-peer review results are already being released. Major journals already allow pre-peer review release of information. I can go to the American Heart Association meeting and present as much pre-peer review stuff as I want, and no journal will tell me that will in any way affect publication. But now the controversy is that if I codify that, I summarize what I've already presented publicly, which, by the way, could already be published by newspapers, because the HA, for example, really pushes the press to report the pre-peer review results that are presented at the meeting, but usually in very truncated forms. If I summarize that and post it on a preprint server, then lots of people freak out. Lots of the journals say we consider that pre-publication. So it sort of seems like when we can do it, but we can't do it that way, in a way that it could actually, somebody over time could see it and recognize it and cite it, because that's called pre-publication. And the issue is that wouldn't you want the pre-peer review stuff that is circulating around to be able to be codified and examined and have a legacy, rather than the hearsay, which is largely what it is right now. So, for example, now medical meetings, or even on clinicaltrials.gov, you can post, we encourage people to post results on clinicaltrials.gov, and that's pre-peer review. And press releases. When the SPRINT trial came out, first, before the paper was published, the NIH had a big press conference and released a lot of information, but you couldn't really find it. It was in the press release. If you didn't have the transcript of the press release, you wouldn't be able to know exactly what they said. It would show up in the New York Times, but no scientist could really find out exactly what they'd said. So the problem is that this stuff circulates around, but the information is often incomplete. May not be citable and may not be searchable, but there is a lot of pre-peer review stuff that's out in the ether. There's limited opportunity for community comments and dialogue also because the platform's not there to do it. So what's an example here? We'll take the IMPROVE-IT trial. Study results were reported. The results were first announced in a press release on August 28, 2014. The trial is presented in a big plenary late-breaking trial slides, which were again posted sort of I think temporarily on the web in November of 2014, but the article doesn't come out until June 3rd, 2015. And so in all of that time, it's sort of peer review stuff is circulating around, but there's no place to really read exactly what they presented, what is already being made available, or to cite it, or for it to engender the kind of conversation that you really would hope to occur. There's also a lack of options for less publishable products, or things that people may not want to take the time to present in a way in a peer review fashion, so protocols and technical reports. We are often going through the motions of publishing what we call methods paper. Really, it's a protocol paper for a study that we're doing. But the truth is, it probably would be just as well to post these because they're locked. The study's ongoing. There's limited opportunity to change what you've done. So it's not really even clear what peer review is doing at that point, except for asking for clarifications for what you've got, which could also be accomplished post-posting. Quality innovations. Research is being done at institutions, but they're more like, they're not necessarily large generalizable trials yet, but they're more preliminary. Rather than taking the time to go a year through public peer review and share with colleagues innovations and quality, it might be easier and better to put these on a preprint or white papers, some government reports that often never get to a place where they can be cited and be enduring products. And then you've got this issue of unpublished trial data. Many trials are never reported or are delayed by years and years. And some of the arguments that they make is that they're having trouble getting through peer review and they've got no place to post the results in any way that's meaningful aside from clinicaltrials.gov. And by the way, this isn't meant to compete or replace clinicaltrials.gov either. We want people to be posting results on clinicaltrials.gov, but the preprint, while it's going through peer review, may provide the opportunity to provide some context to the information that's presented. WHO and others have come out and said, we're working towards a time frame of 12 months from preliminary study completion, the last visit of the last subject for collection of data on the primary outcome, as the global norm for summary results disclosure. 12 months. That may seem like a generous amount of time, but people are rarely getting there. You've got people like the director of the Wellcome Trust saying, not only will this help ensure that these research findings are more discoverable, but also reduce reporting biases, which currently favor publication of trials which have a positive outcome, suggesting that we're having trouble getting this stuff up. People need to start reporting them. And the question is how. The president of Global Health Gates Foundation, it's the 21st century best practice, an essential part of the social contract that underlies medical research. The clinical trial data should be made publicly available less than a year after the trial's completion. Well, that's great, but it shouldn't be that peer review is holding that up. If after a year it's not up, they need to be able to do it. NIH, in general, results information should be submitted no later than 1 year after the completion date of applicable clinical trial and submitted to clinicaltrials.gov, but also with an opportunity for further explanation. In the study we did, only 29% of completed clinical trials, experiments on people conducted by faculty at major academic centers, were published within 2 years of completion, and only 13% were reported results on clinicaltrials.gov. So in addition to this issue about, what needs to go up, how do we foster conversations about preliminary work, and as things are going peer review, we still also do have this problem that people run these experiments on humans. They seem either reluctant to submit to peer review, or peer review is taking a long time, and a very small percentage of them are really showing up. And for that reason, the peer a preprint server could also serve an important purpose. And then again, there's speed. And we went to go look at these protocol papers at BMJ Open. And by the way, BMJ Open, like BMJ, says we don't mind preprint servers. You can publish, submit to a preprint server while it's undergoing peer review with us. We're all in favor of it. It will not prejudice us against your publications. So at BMJ Open, which has this policy, I will say we submitted a lot of things to BMJ Open, and we didn't even realize this. I do now, but in the methods papers, these protocol papers, we looked at the time from submission to publication at BMJ Open. Again, these protocol papers are already locked. I mean, the study is locked, so it's not like a peer reviewer is going to say, by the way, you should be enrolling a different group of people or changing your intervention. I mean, these are locked. So the peer review is largely about clarification or justification of what you're doing. But the average time to publication is 5 months. Some of them are 10 months, 11 months. And all this means is that the world's kind of shielded from this information. If I'm doing a study, I can't really see what somebody else is maybe doing in a related field until 10 months after they're able to get it on BMJ Open. It may have taken them a while to prepare it for BMJ Open, whereas on a preprint server, probably you could be doing it in a much faster way. So what are some of the concerns that people raise in the sort of last 10 minutes? I just want to kind of go over what we've heard back. I mean, in a world of fake news, people are saying there's already too much fake information out there. What in the heck would you want to do? Creating a means by which people can just post stuff pre-peer review, already information overload. And, I hear that, I understand it. This basic concern, there's already too much information. I don't know how you even begin to think about there's already too much information. We're not slowing the information train. In the preprint server, there's lots of sources of information out there. The preprint server serves as a place where scientists can post, and it's an enduring place on the internet where you can go back and see what was posted when. And, I think it's not about volume. It's not information overload. It's a filter failure, as said by Shirky. It's the challenge for us in this era is to figure out how we filter the large amount of data and information that's out there. The solution isn't saying we need to have access to less information, and particularly information that may be useful in our field. But for us, it's going to be about how does it get filtered, how do we get to what we need, how is it helpful to us. There's another concern, as Howard expresses, the public may act prematurely, harm may accrue. And I think that this is about what kind of mitigation strategies are we going to take to ensure people know that these are preliminary, that what kind of screens are we going to have to make sure that what goes up is, we're not going to review it, but that it comes from credible sources and it's being used for the proper purposes. That is, people aren't using it as a platform for political views, for example, but it rather represents science and scientific products. And people have access to a lot of information where there could be harm. I mean, I heard someone say, well, what if people start saying that vaccines are a problem? And the issue is going to be, well, again, if it's put in a scientific article, it's understood as preliminary, then people are going to have the opportunity to comment on it. But we're not going to suggest that anyone act on anything that occurs in a pre-peer review platform. That it may undermine clinicaltrials.gov. I've said this already. It should strengthen clinicaltrials.gov. In fact, if there are trials submitted to the preprint server, it should also be a requirement that they post on clinicaltrials.gov, that we want to try to create these as synergistic. The risk mitigation, I think, involves things like high-level screens. Is it science? What is it that someone has submitted? Is it been IRB approved or exempted? Should it be on clinicaltrials.gov also? Does corresponding author have an ORCID number or an identifier? And we don't want anonymous. These have to be real. You have to be real to put up here. And what kind of labeling and watermarks need to be on the product so that if it's passed around, people understand this is something that's being posted on a preprint server, and it's intended to foster scientific dialogue, not to be used to change clinical practice. Will this jeopardize peer review publication? Well, to be honest, right now, I think we're in a period where there's a lot of discussion about what this means. As I said, The journals have already weighed in and said, you can present at meetings, and that doesn't count as prior publication. Even though by all other measures that content is now out in the world and has been even reported on, they don't think, for example, the New England Journal doesn't consider that as a violation of the Engelfinger rule or prior publication or reporting, interestingly. But they do have concerns about it if it's on a preprint server. Nevertheless, many journals allow preprints, including BMJ, Science, Nature, and others. BMJ says preprints can be posted. This comes from a Wikipedia page that has a bunch of the things. Look what Nature says. The policy states neither conference presentations nor posting on recognized preprint servers constitute prior publication. Nature never wishes to stand in the way of communication between researchers. I love that, by the way. Nature never wishes to stand in the way of communication between researchers. Communication between researchers includes not only conference, but also preprint servers. Here they're talking about arXiv for them as the medium of choice for physicists and astronomers who wish to share drafts. And they go on to say here at the end, if scientists wish to display drafts on research papers on established preprint server for during submission to Nature or any journals, that's fine by us. And I just think that's a terrific thing. So, you know, the idea about these preprints is accelerate scientific progress, push dialogue, be more transparent with what you've got, and get it out there for discussion so that we can all work together and make it so that, you know, if someone's working on something exactly the same as I'm working on, fine, let's put it out there. And by the way, who gets it out there first shouldn't be a function of which journal we went to and whether that journal kept it for a longer period of time and when they decided to finally publish it. Why not, like, this is a finished thing for submission, and that also establishes the provenance of the work right when it feels like it's ready to be pushed forward. NIH has moved to say we encourage the use of preprints, that can be something that can be cited in grants. Cancer Research UK, we accept preprints in grant applications. Of course they do, because it's, again, you're waiting for things to go through the peer review press. You're already out of date. And if you're a scientist, now, again, I'm separating that out from a clinician who may say, I need to see things, you know, for practice, and we're agreeing with that. But as a scientist, if you're waiting for stuff to see it for the first time when it's published, and, you know, that was started years ago, and that was finished a while ago. And even if it underwent change through peer review, your ability to be aware of these things is going to make you a better scientist and better able to move knowledge generation forward. In biology, bioRxiv, who we're in discussions with, has shown that, you know, look, as they went out over the last several years, there's been a marked growth in the life sciences in the use of preprint servers. Now, I will say that there was a very interesting exchange on the preprint servers that occurred recently between a couple of prominent people, including Craig Ventner, who were arguing scientifically and introducing new data about a peer-reviewed publication that Ventner had published. And actually, I thought this was a very good use of a preprint server because they weren't railing publicly about their opinion, but they were taking an article that was published and immediately had a response and new data or new analysis of that data that they wanted to present in the open forum. Meanwhile, Science, the journal Science, came out just this week and said that they're, again, raising questions about whether preprint servers are good, wondering whether or not this was going to undermine the public's faith in science because people are presenting information back and forth, and who's the public to trust is essentially the message. My message is this is what science is. Science is people arguing with data, interpretations going back and forth, not just by opinions, but actually submitting thoughtful, even if conflicting interpretations and building on the data in a way. If we try to make the public, if we pretend, public, you should only wait until we're in full consensus about something. They may be waiting a long time. That's not how science is progressive and self-correcting. And we do zig and zag sometimes as we try to get to truth. And, you know, we need to create the platforms where that can happen. So, you know, we here at Yale, you know, we have this Yale Data Open Access Project where we've been trying to push open science and the sharing of clinical research data, especially at individual patient-level data, which, by the way, is an advertisement. We have hundreds of trials, most of them from Johnson & Johnson, who are ready and able for people to be used for research. You just need to submit an application. Well, we basically say yes to almost everything. It has to be a scientific project, has to adhere to basic science principles. And so this is my little basic ad. If you put in Yoda, Yale, you'll get to our website and you can have access to a lot of data, which you're welcome to use. But in thinking about this, we've also been thinking a lot about dissemination and have become enamored of the idea that in clinical medicine, we should really start thinking about preprint servers. And, you know, the question is, when is the right time for a preprint server? And would this serve some useful purpose in clinical medicine? And I think we think it's time. We think it's time for a platform where people can post results, science for scientists, in the course of peer review that can foster discussion, have the ability for people to comment on so that there can be post-posting on the preprint server discussions and learning, and that also in the end you'll be able to see how did the initial product compare with what was finally published, and we can begin to learn how these things evolve. But it's a way to kind of move things forward in a faster way. We see this as something that could be a community resource, and as in our role, and we're trying to figure out how best to effectuate this. And as I said, we're having a lot of discussions, in particular with the folks at bioRxiv who've been very successful. They're from Cold Spring Harbor Labs and have done a great job in the life sciences. And the goal here isn't to create conflicting preprint servers but to figure out how can we align the community in a way so that there's a reliable, trustworthy, credible, neutral platform that people can trust is going to be around, has easy functionality. And for us, you know, it's not about ownership or whether it's bioRxiv, whoever owns it, but can we as a community be stewards of this and iteratively learn from it and use it in a way that can help us advance this useful way? And the ultimate goal is, by us or anyone else, I think, is not to establish a server, but to improve and accelerate science, promote collaboration, enhance transparency, reduce waste, figure out if this is another tool we can use that can help us communicate with each other. And ultimately, we need to be thinking about the scientific enterprise. That our current scientific enterprise, and I say this over and over again, it's inadequate to keep up with the information needs of our patients, clinicians, of people running healthcare systems, of people trying to improve health. We're not moving fast enough. And we need, and there's not enough money in the world if we keep running knowledge generation efforts at the price tag that we've had historically. We need to figure out how to move faster, better, cheaper. We need to know how to collaborate more effectively, and we need to be able to push the frontiers more efficiently. And the idea is that this could be a tool that would work. One of the asks I've said to journal editors, and I presented a form of this, a lot like this, to the Peer Review Congress, was that I think journals should allow the coexistence of preprint servers and not penalize scientists who use them. And I would challenge them to say, is there really a difference between presenting at a meeting and posting on a preprint server in a way that people can access and use? We're debating names. We have this medRxiv like this. If we're going to work with bioRxiv, it may be med without the A, archive. We're kind of just trying to talk about. But we are committed to trying to push this idea forward. Like I said, we're in deep discussions with bioRxiv about how this could work. And we've thought ourselves. We've talked with the Open Science Framework and Brian Nosek, great group, who's also pushing open science. And we're trying to figure out how this might go. But let me just say this presentation, and I'm just at the end here, it's about sharing these ideas, the enthusiasm for the possibilities that this could be a force of good within science for us. And, you know, tell us what you think. Send us a note. Give us suggestions. Help us think through this. And we're also looking to see who might want to join us as we try to push forward. But we're committed to seeing whether or not this might work, also evaluating it thoughtfully and trying to, again, protect against unintended adverse consequences, because certainly, like any new ideas, there's always a possibility of some things occurring that you would want to protect against. So, Adrian, let me stop there, and we can start a discussion.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So this is great. So why don't we, Mary Jo, why don't we unmute Greg Simon's line and hear from him. But let me start off, Harlan. I just want to give you a case example of why there may be worries and hear your response here. So, and you as an editor, I'm sure have seen this, and I'll just say as a researcher, I certainly pushed the boundaries of what I thought was a great data in terms of my own interpretation and conclusion. And kind of a recent example of this was that we finished a clinical trial and missed the primary endpoint, but the first secondary endpoint actually had improvement nominally for all-cause mortality. And we thought that was a really important finding. And, you know, our first version of the paper, you know, highlighted that both in the conclusion as well as extensively in the discussion. And through the peer review and editorial process, you know, we certainly got called out on it, and then, you know, it certainly was not only softened, but, you know, removed from the abstract, and it was largely left as a very, what I call concretely in the discussion. And so one of the things that you highlight a little bit is kind of the worries about zealots, their own research, over-interpreting, and that could have unintended consequences. So what's your take on that as a kind of an example?
Well, look, I mean, I think we know that you spend time on a trial, you come in with a hypothesis. I mean, you're an enthusiast, and it is true that the journal editors, through the course of peer review, often will, you know, tamp down some of those conclusions. Again, I mean, I'll just emphasize that the point here is around saying that we're in a race to help people. And the question is for scientists who are capable of doing their own peer review, particularly. You know, if it's in my field, I mean, you can smell people's over-enthusiasm. It doesn't, I'm not accepting at face value what anyone says when I'm, you know, in the field and trying to move forward. I'm looking at what are they presenting, what data do they have, and I may, by the way, make comments. That we want to be able to create the opportunity for posting comments, and the peer review is actually occurring after they're posting, and people are beginning conversations. I mean, you want to try to curate it so that people are civil and that they're raising, you know, good points, but I think the idea here is, should I wait a year for other people to filter that information before I get to see it, and then now I can act on it as a scientist for the next experiment I may run? Or is it better to share it immediately so that I and others and you in the field can be stimulated and comment on it, help them improve it, but also be able to think, okay, what's the next step we need to do now, maybe a year or 6 months or 8 months before it would show up, you know, in a journal. And in the worst case scenarios, you and I both know, sometimes even a meritorious article can bounce between several journals. Even if the journals are only taking 3 or 4 months, it can be a year and a half before some of the papers come out. And if you, as a scientist, are reacting to that at that speed, you are not necessarily going to be slower to help push progress than you would if we were sharing that more openly.
Right. No, I would imagine, like in the scenario I painted out, that the community would also, if they were just seeing the actual results, they would be able to not only make their own interpretation, but also so-called publicly vote about what the right interpretation is. But that's
right.
A good example. Greg, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and you know, first I have to say I think this is fantastic, and I was literally cheering out loud and pumping my fist as you were making this case. But I think, you know, we do need to consider the business issues here, you know, the business model of medical publishing and how, you know, faster access to data, you know, could you know, be on a collision course with that business model. The preprint server has been, you know, primarily, as I understand, sort of a completely academic activity, which is sort of volunteer supported. What I'm wondering is, what is the business model that would support that, and is it possible for traditional journals to think about developing branded preprint servers that are supported by advertising so that this new way of disseminating things more quickly would not be seen as a threat to the enterprise?
Yeah, I think it's so if the business model is that we need to be the ones producing the initial splash, and so we're trying to keep people from prior publication because who's going to buy our journal if the information is largely already out there? I think that's a non-winner. It's an unfortunate business model that should go away. If the business model is our peer review and the money that's being spent helps filter the information, improve it, curate it, and make it more presentable to non-experts so that, when they're ready for it, they're getting something that's more finished product, then this shouldn't be a threat to that. I think the question of the sustainability of the preprint server, how does preprint server keep itself afloat, is right now it's largely in something that's done in the service of the community, try to keep very lean, and foundations have support. I mean, in the Center for Open Science that Brian runs, Arnold Foundation has provided generous funding for him to launch preprint servers and sort of be able to whiteboard them and support them. I think bioRxiv, for a while was supporting it out of Cold Spring Harbor, but then Chan Zuckerberg has come in with a generous support to be able to allow them to build it out. Whether I think in the end, whether having ads on preprint servers sort of is a turnoff to people and they sort of feel like it's not good, or whether people are willing to do that. I mean, the eyeballs that you're going to get on the preprint server ideally are not going to be the eyeballs of people writing prescriptions or, I'm not sure what ads people are going to take out to get scientists viewing this. And so arXiv right now is, Cornell runs it. I think they do spend a considerable amount keeping it up, and some other universities contribute money to support the mission. So I think largely this preprint server is something that at least of its own right is through charitable contributions, relationships with foundations, or trying to get educational institutions to see it as a way to help support their faculty and promote the dissemination of science. For the actual large multinational corporations that are running publishing enterprises, is this going to be a threat? I think it's different than what they're doing. Whether they'll put up a preprint server, I did hear some meanderings, like some large publishers might do that. I think they may. I hope they don't do it to fend off the kind of thing that might be from the community as opposed to something that might turn into a business side. But these are really good points and things that need to be worked out.
Yeah, I wish you could have seen me. I was saying I wish you could have seen me smiling as you were saying that, because I've sometimes said I think the current business model is about monetizing ignorance and holding on to information long enough that people are willing to pay to have it released. But that's because I don't work in that business, but I have to recognize that business is pretty powerful in our world.
So Greg, just congratulations. You just got a quote of the day that we will archive for later, so thanks for that. Well, Harlan, I wanted to hear your comments a little bit, and this may be towards some of the more, the larger fields like cardiology, where there are significant meetings, large meetings, where for the big studies, there's strong appetite to hold the data to have a late-breaking trial presentation at the major meeting with a simultaneous publication, and everything's like embargoed to kind of have the ultimate cliffhanger. What's your thoughts about that in terms of both the business model as well as how this fits in with their preprints?
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I have shared thoughts about sometimes the incentives are set so that it may not be in the interest of, more rapid dissemination. To be fair, there also is a possibility at those meetings that, there's like a fuller, more comprehensive vetting because everyone's attention's on it, and it provides an opportunity for a panel to weigh in. But I think most often in those cases, I, again, try to separate out information that's coming that's intended to influence practice and that which is, you know, something about a product that's not on the market but is moving science. And you know, I think it depends on the time. If something's being held up a month or two so that at a venue like that it can be fully vetted, it doesn't bother me very much. If something's being held up 6 months or long, you know, there's a longer period where something's being held up, it just seems like unnecessary and unfortunate because it's likely slowing progress. So, you know, I think all of this is about trying to say, how do we start to foster a scientific culture where we're exchanging information more rapidly and easily? And that doesn't mean everything's, you know, CANTOS came out pretty quickly after it ended, although I think it was June that the press release came out, and then it was presented in you know, the end of August, early September. And Sprint, you know, even though they had that press release that was hard to figure, you know, they were within 3 months with a publication and a presentation at the meeting. Those don't bother me as much as ones where it's a year out and we still don't have anything posted, or just our routine studies, including the observational studies, which is like, if you've got something that I don't think you can have both ways. If we're gonna, it's like on one hand you're gonna say what we publish doesn't matter, so then what are we doing it anyway for? I mean, either you've got something that's worth sharing, and in that case you should share pretty rapidly, or it's not worth sharing, and you know it's good now, it's good in 3 years, it's good in 5 years, it's good in 10 years, and I don't know, what kind of science is that? I mean, if you really got something that it doesn't matter whether it comes out, whether you share it today or I share it in a year, how important can it be? I mean, we need to be focusing on work that's likely to move the field forward, and if we believe that in aggregate, collectively, we are going to help people with the knowledge that we're generating, then we should be sharing it rapidly. If we think the stuff we're sharing is off base and it doesn't matter when it comes out because it's not going to help anyone anyway, then I think we should be finding different questions to study, because we got a bigger problem than preprint servers.
Great. Let's hear from David Jensen. Is the line open for him?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this has been certainly talked about and addressed and without any real solutions, but the question was around the use of this system for means other than which it is purported to be used. Given sort of the current state of our societal environment, I can easily submit a paper that, you know, describes that vaccines cause autism, and then it can be a crap paper, it doesn't matter, and the peer review will kill it, but it's already out there, the public has seen it, and now all I have to do is keep demanding that the establishment didn't want my ideas out in the paper. I mean, I see this as a serious risk to this entire process. I don't have, you know, fundamentally I don't have issues with it, but, you know, on a day-to-day tactical level, I can see this failing spectacularly. Thoughts?
Maybe, but you know, and it could be the, you know, somebody in Vladivostok, you know, just wants to just feed the server fake articles. But I think you've got to have some sort of screening piece. I don't think you want to screen out based on the fact whether you agree or disagree with the results. But I think the point is someone can post that anyway on the web. They can post it on a fake preprint server. They can do whatever they want. The question is, are you going to have a credible place where people can post stuff if they meet standards, not peer-reviewed, and then allow the community to come in and comment on it? And again, it's a filtering issue. I mean, I don't think it gives any more credence to it because it's on the preprint server, and I think that's up to us to make that really clear. It's a place where if you post it, it can be found and cited and talked about, but it's not. It's preliminary, and it's intended for other scientists to consider and ponder. And the success of this will, I believe, depend on our ability to frame it properly about what this is. Now, does that stop anyone from making any claims about it? No, but they can make claims about anything they want. I mean, there's stuff everywhere on the web that people can cite. There's anyone need to go into it, right? You know what it is. So the fact that this gets, that some people posted on this, you know, if it meets standards, yeah, I mean, what % of the stuff that will be posted here is actually true or actionable? I don't know, but they actually said the same thing about peer review press too. I mean, Howard said to me at the end, you know, we just got an article that said that vaccines were bad, and when we did peer review, we turned them around 180 degrees, and now they say it's the same article, they say it's good. What's going to stop that from getting out there? I'm going, well, first of all, that could have gone to a different journal, and maybe they didn't pick up what you picked up. But second of all, just because I'm a preprint server lets people see what's going on. When I see the stuff, like I said, the machine learning stuff, in some cases, I don't even care if what they found is true. I want to see how they're thinking and what methods they're using and how they're progressing the field, and that gives us ideas. But again, you know, it's going to be how we frame it, I think, if it's going to be successful.
Hey, Harlan, can you, there's been a lot of attention towards fake news in the political campaigns, and actually I think people are doing a lots of investigations about how that can influence public opinion and actually affect decisions that people didn't anticipate could be affected. Do you see any parallel risk here regarding preprints and fake news?
Yeah, again, like I said, that so people can say promote fake news without preprints. They can post stuff in the web anywhere they want and push stuff. Again, if you start getting timid to say, okay, this thing is a way for scientists to communicate with scientists, while we couldn't possibly set it up because somebody's going to be doing fake news with it, I think you're putting yourself in a position where you're not going to move anything forward because everything in now is susceptible to these things. So this is where we were with data sharing. Somebody said, well, you can't share data because you have a lot of people out there with an agenda. They're going to take this data, and they're going to do what they want with it, and then they're going to publish it, and the whole world will be confused. Well, yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, if you start sharing data, people are also looking at each other's work. They're having a chance to validate. They may extend. It may reduce waste. I mean, everything we do has some risk associated with it. I think we try to implement risk mitigation strategies. If people might want to tweet and pretend like preprint servers a peer review article, well, yeah, they're lying. That's not true. But I think that, again, this would be done as an experiment. You see whether you can foster, the end goal here is to foster within our community a greater sense of coordination, collaboration, communication, a means by which we might be able to move ahead faster as scientists because we're better aware of what colleagues are doing. We're not afraid that we're going to be preempted, that somebody's going to scoop us, that the journal is taking too long and somebody who's competing with us is going to a faster journal, that we're basically saying our job is to beat down disease, promote health, you know, and that we need to use all means possible to ensure that we're communicating well with each other and honing our own approach based on what others are doing in order to make best use of resources to make progress. And that this is just a platform that enables that kind of communication. If people want to contaminate it with some stuff, then, you know, the hope is that the community will recognize that, but even if they don't, it's like off on the side, you know, it's just not, this is meant to help our scientific community to move faster and better, and we just need to frame it that way.
Right. So it sounds like sunshine's a good thing, so that makes sense. Let's open the line to Rich 2. My guess I know which Rich it is, but Rich 2.
Yeah, so it's Rich Platt, and I'm sorry about that. I don't know how to change it. If
that's fine,
you guys
Rich,
can
go ahead.
me, that'd be good. So Harlan, I wonder whether things are not so dire as we might think. I mean, we can put protocols out in the public space, and the ICMJE is pretty explicit about saying results tables and a 500-word structured abstract are fair game to put on any WHO-approved registry, and so it seems to me that's not as good as posting a very long detailed report, but it's not nothing. And so I'd say on the one hand, we can make a start and get at least the high-level results of science out as soon as it's ready. And there should be grounds for reasonable people then to negotiate beyond 500 words, if that's really important. Maybe the next step is 780 words, and then if that feels good, we can go to 1,260 or something. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think exactly. I mean, we can make progress, and the beauty of this is that it's an enduring, citable source that can provide greater context and be a means to communicate.
Right. So
yeah, I agree.
I'm just making the argument that we're partly there. That is, I think we don't need a revolution, and we don't even need to talk about knocking the financial underpinning out from under journals, but just negotiating what's the maximum length of a structured abstract that can be posted on a registry, because there are now a bunch of approved registries, and it's not that hard to start a new one.
Well, I think that you're making a good point, and actually I think we've talked about this internally. The degree to which we start talking about disruption and revolution, the degree to which we make everyone nervous. The degree to which we say a lot of this is happening already, but there's no searchable, citable, easily accessible site where this stuff, lives forever, and you can go back and see it and see where it was and who posted it and comment on it. And this is about taking a lot of things that are already happening and making it better and clearer. So I think, a winning strategy is less likely to say we're trying to blow everything up than it is to say we're trying to complement what already exists and improve the mechanism by which we can do it.
So it just seems to me I think we could declare partial victory now and just build on it, and it won't take a giant step. It'll take the community of people who are generating content to take advantage of a lot of the opportunities that currently exist.
Rich, your last point about that, if the community starts doing it, then it becomes, as you said, essentially a fait accompli here, and so that's probably one of the really important steps here. Hey, last question, Harlan, and kind of 30 seconds or less. Do you see any issues with the very top-tier journals? You touched on JAMA a little bit, but New England and Lancet and, within the fields, each of the top specialty journals. What's going to happen there?
I think we just need to start a discussion. Like I said, the idea that there shouldn't be pre-publication because that interrupts a business model where they're the ones who are supposed to be making the splash, I don't think is necessarily a winning one. Their argument that they need to do peer review, so when it goes out to practicing physicians, they can trust that it's been through a process and been improved. I think that is good, and I think it's where Rich went, which is, that's great. We think that should continue. We want to support it. This isn't competitive with it, but we need ways for scientists to exchange information. This is just an extension of the national meetings. And instead of having us get together at the national meetings and stand up at a plenary, which you guys are already accepting, what we're saying is let us use this as a plenary. We have a platform here where we want to post something and pretend it's a late-breaking plenary at the national meeting instead of thinking of it as a pre-publication that competes with you. And the more that we can push that idea as an incremental change in what we're doing because we're trying to speed communication among scientists, I think that there's a chance that they'll understand it that way.
Great. Well, thanks for that, and thanks again for another great Grand Rounds and discussion. And I'll leave with one comment. It sounds like Greg Simon is willing to become your campaign manager if you do choose to run against Trump. So, Greg, thanks for that. Everyone, I hope you will be able to join next week for Collaboratory Grand Rounds. We have another great one lined up with Karen DeSalvo, the former Acting Assistant Secretary for Health and National Coordinator for Health IT. And Karen is going to describe her experience there, and health is more than health care. and how she sees the future. So it should be a great presentation discussion. So thanks, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.